NFL Reactions with the Sports Memery.
Welcome to the NFL Reaction video of Week 2. I'm your host, Leon Phelps. I've got a little bit of Cavassier, and you know what that means. I'm ready for some overreactions from the week. It's already been 2 weeks in on the NFL season, and I already see a bunch of things I can overreact about. Brandon, what's your overreaction of Week 2? Welcome to the ladies, man. What's your queries?
Well, ladies, man, Minshew Mania is for real. He is a franchise quarterback, and he is going to win the MVP this year.
Is that your redneck accent?
I don't know what that is.
That was something.
It was great. I like it. Yes, Gardner Minshew. That needs to be everyone's overreaction of the week. Gardner Minshew for MVP. 6 touchdowns through 2 weeks and over a 75% completion rating on arguably the worst roster in the league. There's not really much else to say about that. And he looks good. Jaguars are 1-1. They could be 2-0. It's insane.
Yeah, I mean, that's a terrible roster. He has no talent around him. Offensive line isn't especially good. And he just goes out and slings it. Doesn't give a shit.
I mean,
I love it.
Let's look at their upcoming schedule. They have Miami, where they're favored. Then they're going to play Cincy. Then they're going to play the Texans. I mean, they very well could be 4-1
right
after 5 games. I mean, that's who would have thought? But that's a very real possibility.
I mean, they play in a bad division. Really, their only competition is the Titans. After seeing what Houston's putting up for the last 2 weeks. And speaking of Houston, man. Some interesting aspects about that Houston game. Number one, Will Fuller, who by all rights should probably be their number 1 receiver, got 0 targets in this game. So from a fantasy perspective, if you own Will Fuller, things are not looking good there from really any perspective. I mean, even David Johnson had a subpar game. So what do you guys take from that? I mean, does Houston have any shot this year, or are they just dead already?
I mean, that's a guy who has a lot of injury issues anyways. So if he's on the field, you want him to be producing. You can't have him play the whole game, most of the snaps, and not be targeted.
Right.
I mean, so again, I just analyzed Jacksonville's schedule. So they're 0-2. They now have the Steelers coming up, the Vikings, who I'm still high on despite being 0-2, and then they have Jacksonville, and then the Titans, and then the Packers. So I mean, shit. Very possible they start 1-5, 1-6, and your season's over. So
At what point does Bill O'Brien get fired?
Somewhere in that stretch.
You'd have to think so, right? So it's Bill O'Brien and who else? I mean, Dan Quinn should be on a hot seat. Who else?
Well, Adam Gase. There's no way he makes it through this season.
Adam Gase leads the Vegas odds for first coach to get fired, and then I believe it's either Bill O'Brien. And then I know number 3 is officially now Dan Quinn. I don't know how this guy wasn't fired years ago. So let's just go ahead and talk about that Cowboys game. Holy shit, man. I watched that in the first quarter. And of course, jokingly, they went up 21-0 or 20-0.
20. Yeah.
I was like, well, geez, they're going to find a way to blow this. And I said it completely joking at the bar I was watching at. And then as the score kept going on, I was like, what the fuck? No way. They can't actually do this again.
Yeah.
It's a disease. Kyle Shanahan has the same disease. There's a disease where, these teams, these organizations, the Falcons, man, you just got to take out the trash. Get rid of Dan Quinn. There's some stigma about him that if you're up by a couple touchdowns and the other team starts scoring touchdowns, I mean, they're immediately – the whole morale of the team is shot, and everyone's going, here we go again.
So none of us played professionally, right? But we all know kickoff rules, right? Like, we know you can touch the ball before it goes 10 yards on the receiving side of it. Like, Hayden Hurst, who I'm pretty high on, I think he's going to have a good year, potentially top 5 tight end. He is literally standing there backpedaling. Hayden Hurst was the number 1 player closest to that ball. It's not squarely on him, but are you kidding me, man? Like, inexcusable. It's unexplainable.
Yeah, I mean, they had some pretty big mishaps. I mean, Julio Jones drops a touchdown pass. When does that ever happen? I mean, he's about as sure-handed as it gets. But you're right. I mean, it's a disease. Once that gets planted in your head that, man, no lead is safe, you start playing tight, and then that becomes one of those self-fulfilling prophecies.
Yep.
It's a culture now. I mean,
Yep.
it's a very real thing, and it's hard to shake.
Yep. And my overreaction for the week is that the Vikings are done. They're terrible. I mean, there was a lot of Vegas odds makers that had them, leading the division. I'm telling you, man, I've seen Vikings teams in the past that I knew could kind of overcome a slow start. This is not one of them. They have offensive line issues, which is just so deadly when you have a quarterback like Kirk Cousins, who, if you can't get that guy going early, he's so bad. It was the worst game of his entire career.
Yeah.
And
I think Kirk excels in the play action too. And if you can't get that going, you're missing so much of what he actually does well, and you're just stuck with like the shitty Kirk stuff.
Two weeks in a row, 2 safeties for Kirk Cousins. Now, neither of them were his fault, especially this week. I don't know if you saw the play, but the coaches called it dead for the quarterback's sake. Meanwhile, Kirk Cousins kept driving and actually ended up on the 1-yard line. It was a bullshit called safety. I mean, he literally finished on the 1-yard line. It never should have been called. But once again, safety completely altered the chemistry of that game. And from that point on, just like the Packers game the week before, they had no chance. They had no prayer. Just Vikings look bad.
You're giving up on them, and kind of maybe understandably so as a Vikings fan. And you're probably a little pissed off on Overreaction Monday. But if you are wanting to look for like a sexy bet to win the Super Bowl, they're plus 5,000. Plus 5,000. I mean, that's it's not maybe worth a $20 to $25 bet there to profit $1,000.
Yeah.
So,
but if you look at their path, I mean, they start 0-2, Packers start 2-0, and they have a lost game between the two of them.
I think that additional wild card game is going to be huge. I mean, they could sneak in, and we've seen magic from Minnesota.
Yeah, and the NFC is going to whoop the shit out of itself this year for sure. It's going to be a bloodbath for those final 2 spots. Yeah, I could see them warming up. They need Danielle Hunter back really bad. And Ngakoue has been almost unseen. He has not made his presence felt. So we have no pass rush, but it's weird because all the good Vikings players have been playing really well. Harrison Smith's playing well. Kendricks is playing better than he ever has, but it's just, they look bad, man. It's just, there's so many different components to it. I don't think it's one thing that they can fix and they'd be better, which is why I think they're done for the year.
What do you think of Diggs in Buffalo? Catch any of his game?
I did. Yeah, I mean, he looks good. He's always been a good player.
Instant chemistry with Josh Allen.
Yeah, he's always been a great player. The problem is when the going gets rough, they're 2-0. Diggs is always happy when they're winning. But the problem is once they start losing, I'll never forget Diggs on the sideline of the Saints playoff game last year complaining about targets while we're beating the Saints on the road in the playoffs. That's the fucking time that you just shut the hell up and just move on. Like, he's a locker room cancer. I love the guy coming out. I mean, he was a huge underdog coming out, but just don't like him anymore. I mean, he's eventually going to get unhappy, and that's when things go wrong.
I'm looking at Minnesota's schedule. It's hard to find wins. I mean, there's about 4 or 5 that you're like, okay, yeah. But then the rest started getting, pretty dicey. I mean, that may not be too much of an overreaction. Like, they very easily could do a 7-9 season, 6-10, maybe even if it completely falls apart. Just looking at their schedule being 0-2.
Yeah. And here's an overreaction for you. The Steelers are the best team in the NFL. I know they only beat the Broncos by 5 points last week, and they didn't look overly good against the Giants, but we're talking a player coming back from, essentially Tommy John surgery and Ben Roethlisberger. He's learning to throw again. He's getting warmed up as time goes on, but there are so many things to like about that team, especially guys like Deontay Johnson, who, that wide receiving core is ridiculous. Maybe the best the Steelers have ever had. Their 4th receiver is Claypool.
Yeah.
It's unreal.
No, they're definitely deep. They got 2. The interesting thing about this whole back and forth between Connor and Snell is they have 2 guys who can run the ball now. And they trust to run the ball in pretty much any situation. So that's not a bad thing to have. That's a position you don't mind a little competition at. And the defense is
hot
so
hand,
good.
Right? Neither Benny Snell or James Conner, even though Tomlin called Conner his bell cow, Like let's get real. You're gonna ride the hot hand, and when you have two guys, that doubles your chances of one of them being hot. I love the situation. Actually, I hate it for fantasy owners, but I love the situation for the team.
Right.
Definitely. Absolutely.
Another thing that they're definitely not going to stay on pace for, they're on pace for 80 sacks. They led the league the past 3 years with 54, 56, and 52 sacks. They may put up 60 sacks this year, which is absolutely absurd. Amount of sacks. That pressure that they can create both in the run and on the edge is incredible.
Now, I definitely think some were manufactured, just the fact that like Driscoll is not good. He gets happy feet. He tries to get out of the pocket, but doesn't get out of the pocket. So that number might be a little inflated. Driscoll didn't look that bad, which is a little scary at moments. The fact that, like, wait a second, like, why are the Steelers making Driscoll look decent? But the team is so deep. They're really deep, and I don't think that's necessarily that far off right now from what they've shown us. They might be one of the best teams in the NFL. I think Seattle's in the conversation, but they're definitely up there.
If the offense can get it together, which it seems like they are, it's cool because they've had 2 good warm-up games. I mean, the 3 quarterbacks they've played against now are Daniel Jones, Drew Lock, and Jeff Driscoll. Yep. So if you're wanting to get your defense warmed up, those are 3 guys that you definitely want to do it against.
Yeah, and they got Deshaun Watson coming in. I know we'll get on this on Wednesday, but he's the quarterback that's got sacked the most in the league, and he has a problem holding onto the ball. So while I agree with you, Derek, I think that pace for 80 is going to dip. I don't think it dips in week 3. We'll talk about it more later.
Besides Tunzel, they have nothing to protect Watson.
Yeah.
Speaking of holding on to the ball for too long, let's talk about the Browns and Bengals game. Let's backtrack to last Thursday. And I want to talk about 2 rookies that have just come into the NFL who already have just wowed the hell out of me. Number 1, of course, Joe Burrow. God, that guy's the real deal.
Oh, yeah.
He does not look too small for the moment. He is playing on a really bad team, and he almost won that game. I mean, they never looked out of it. He looks every bit as billed. And then, of course, the guy that everybody really doubted, and a lot of people think that maybe the Chargers stretched on, Herbert, coming in and almost beating the Chiefs. Like, that's unreal, man. And the Chargers are for real. That defense is really good. That could be a top 5 defense. I'm already hearing rumblings of them talking about possibly bringing back Tyrod Taylor. That's a fucking mistake. You almost just beat the Chiefs, the Super Bowl champs.
Yeah.
Roll with your boy.
He looked confident. I don't think anything he did was one of those things that you're worried about. He threw some passes maybe he shouldn't have, but you want to see a guy who's confident in his arm and is willing to take some chances. I mean, Matt Stafford has made a living out of throwing questionable passes to talented receivers.
Right.
So it's not necessarily negative. I think he fell victim to some recency bias. His junior year coming out, he was one of the top quarterback prospects. If he came out at that point, he probably would have went earlier in the draft. Goes back and just played an okay season. He played his schedule. That Oregon team wasn't very good. They didn't do much from an overall. They weren't a high profile team. He got passed up by some of the other guys who are a little more high profile, and then his stock fell. And I think the Chargers, it's a great fit for him. Can't go back to Tyrod Taylor.
Nope, cannot. And,
I mean, literally, they won. I don't have it in front of me, but either 5 or 6 games last year with Phillip Rivers, who is not an NFL starting quarterback. If you can get better quarterback play with, again, we were just talking about the Steelers with a 2 running back combo. You got Eckler and Josh Kelly. I didn't really know who Josh Kelly was, but he showed a little bit of burst, a nice little change of pace on what Eckler brings. And then we've talked in length about the wide receiver talent. Keenan Allen, Hunter Henry, Eckler, they can all get out in space, and so can he. The most impressive play, which I don't know if you want your franchise quarterback doing it too often, was he truck sticked a corner, like completely ran him over in the first quarter. Yeah. That showed me that guy's got all the confidence. He's not running out of bounds. He's not sliding. He's going.
He's a big body, massive.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you were talking earlier. You made the comparison to like a rookie Ben Roethlisberger.
Yeah,
I think it's good. I think it's a good.
He's big and lumbering, hard to take down. Exactly. He looks like he could play tight end. He's huge.
And a guy that slides down in the draft to a pretty complete team.
Right.
Yeah.
Here's a question for you. How bad are the Jets that the 49ers can beat them 31-13 and lose as many people as they did and look like they did? I mean, I think a lot of people thought the Jags were the worst team coming into the league. It is clearly the Jets. I mean, they might not win a game this season.
The Jets are terrible. Yeah, there's no way around that.
If only we had a Jets fan on this page that could come and talk about it.
No, I think you'd agree at this point. I mean, 49ers, they lost everybody, all their stars, all of them. So they've now lost Nick Bosa, who's done for the year. I mean, it's not confirmed yet, but it's confirmed. That guy's gone. Who knows when Kittle's going to come back? They already were without Deebo Samuel coming in for the year. Then you get Garoppolo, who might miss a few weeks.
High ankle, yeah, he's out a few weeks.
Mostert, who has busted a 70-plus yard run on both games this season and was one of their huge catalysts for the playoffs last year. I mean, there is a lot to be afraid of.
So they lose Bosa and Solomon Thomas, the other defensive end, on consecutive plays.
Right.
2 plays in a row, those guys carted off, and the way they built their team is from that D line out. So when you're talking about, that's 2 guys they took I think Solomon Thomas was a 7th overall pick.
Right.
So 2 top 10 picks you have invested in guys who are now out for the season. They had a lot of depth, but now that depth's tested, and I don't know what it does long term, how that affects them. Arizona looks good. Seattle looks good. They might be in trouble.
Yeah, I definitely want to stay on 49ers. They're playing on the same field. A lot of the other players have already come out and said they're like worried to play on it. Are you guys buying into this turf situation going on there at MetLife?
I mean, you have to at this point.
Yeah.
All these injuries, they continue to stack up. It's happened with other fields in the past. I don't buy it completely, but yeah, I mean, if there's a little bit of smoke there, I think it's at least reasonable to consider.
What are the odds of losing 2 guys in consecutive plays to ACLs?
Yeah, it's so bad. Losing Nick Bosa, I can't say it enough. That's a guy you want to build your whole team around. Losing him for a season. I mean, this just kind of speaks to it really has been consistent. You lose the Super Bowl, you're going to be bad the next year. I think it's almost getting there's a long enough track record now that you can almost bank on it. So whatever the expectations are coming to the season, if there was a way to short that team on a Vegas bet, short the Super Bowl loser every single time because they look bad, just destroyed.
So, Drew, I know did you stick with your Seattle pick? I picked Seattle. Derek, who did you pick for NFC West?
For NFC West, I think I took Seattle as well.
Yeah. So I know Newman and maybe Kurt took San Francisco, but yeah, they were not buying into the Super Bowl hangover. It's real, and the injuries are unfortunate, but the level of play, yeah, I mean, could have seen it coming.
Well, and speaking of the NFC West, what about the Rams? The Rams are back.
Yep.
The 2018 Rams are back. Speaking of Super Bowl hangovers, too. This is the team that looked every bit, like they belonged in the 2018 Super Bowl. Obviously, that was just an awful game overall, and both teams really looked bad. But, yeah, the Rams were not the Rams last year, and they are back. They really have everything going for them. They have they've completely redesigned their offense. It is a run-first offense now. Very run-heavy. Guys like Cooper Kupp, they're just not playing like they did last year. I think they realized there was a fundamental flaw, and they have made the exact right adjustments. Sean McVay, can't say enough about that guy. The Rams are for real this year. I mean,
why they're for real? In my opinion, is Jared Goff is playing above average football.
Yeah,
he's not playing good, but he's playing above average. He isn't putting him in positions that hurt them, which he did last year. And we're only 2 weeks in, but if he can just keep up playing above average football, this is a really dangerous team.
I think it really speaks to like how much I like Sean McVay, and I know Drew, you're on the same boat there. We talk about this all the time. To pay a quarterback that much money, to have that much early success with a guy, realize that you have a season where you put too much on him and he let you down. To then have kind of just the presence of mind. Some guys get so invested in a quarterback, so invested in a system that they're unwilling to change. He stopped, said, wait, fundamental flaw in how we were attacking people offensively. We need to take some of this pressure off of Jared and let him just distribute the ball in better passing situations, and completely overhauls the offense. takes that pressure off of him, and now it's clicking.
And from a fantasy perspective, don't expect the running back situation there to get any clearer because it will never be clear. Last week, Malcolm Brown was the definitive number one back. Now this week, Darrell Henderson sees the role and looks really good. Cam Akers goes out for possibly a few weeks. But now what's going to happen is Darrell Henderson's probably going to roll into next week, have another good game. Cam Akers is going to heal up, who's still the most talented back in that backfield. And Cam Akers is going to come back, probably steal some more carries. So be very
situation in Pittsburgh, right? I mean, if you can have multiple guys that can get hot, that's a good way to play.
Sure.
Very similar situations.
But if you are playing fantasy and you need a running back, definitely Darrell Henderson's the guy to own right now. So go after him in waivers this week, but you never know, man. It's one of these situations that's going to fluctuate on a week-to-week basis. I think they're going to always give it to the hot hand. And Darrell Henderson, he only outtouched Malcolm Brown by 2 snaps last week. So he's not the definitive number one back there. With Cam Akers, they're probably going to get more carries to him. But, yeah, that's a scary situation to touch from a fantasy perspective for sure.
Definitely.
But, yeah.
Speaking of fantasy running backs, are we buying anything into Fournette's big run there at the end of the game? Is he somebody that we could see get more usage as he learns the playbook and gets more affiliated? What are your guys' thoughts on him in Tampa?
I still don't know. Long term, I don't buy on him. I think he's got a lot of tread taken off the tires there. They too many carries in college, which we've seen be a hangover and affect guys in their pro careers. But that big run at the end of the game, I mean, that's textbook how he had that really productive season. He wears you down. He eventually breaks a tackle, or a guy half commits to a tackle, and then he makes that big run. So if they're willing to give him the touches, there's no reason it's not repeatable.
Yeah, for sure. And at running back, it's all about position, situation in fantasy. And right now, he's in a good situation. I don't think Ronald Jones is overly talented. So if he can just be better than Ronald Jones, he could potentially steal a large bit of that workload. But just settle down on your expectations of that backfield right now, because they were playing the Panthers. And we said it earlier that, the Jets are the worst team in the league. The Panthers might be the second worst team in the league. I mean, especially without Christian McCaffrey, that team is terrible. So let's see what happens next week. Week prior to an actual defense in New Orleans, Leonard Fournette had 5 rushes for like 5 yards. So I think everyone needs to take a step back and just realize that they were playing a really bad team and looked pretty ineffective at times. And we didn't really even talk about the Bucs game yet, but
a lot of drops.
There's a lot of mistakes going on. They do have a lot of injuries right now, so that's all applicable. But
Gronk, an absolute non-factor. Like, just.
Me and Derek have been talking about that for a while, though. That people were expecting the old Gronk to come in. He was never going to come in. This is a role player. You got a good blocker on your team, but the old Gronk is gone.
Yeah,
it really is.
He's gonna, all his fantasy value is tied to red zone targets.
Yeah,
he's not going to have 10 catches. He's not going to have 100 yards. What you're hoping for out of him is his blocking doesn't deteriorate to the point where he's not on the field, and he gets 3 catches for 8 yards and 2 touchdowns.
If you have a deep enough fantasy league where you can afford to keep him on your bench, then keep him. But if not, and you are looking for a guy to drop, that's a guy to drop. Seriously, he's the guy to drop of that team right now.
But I mean, they put up 31 against a bad Carolina team, but I mean, they got after Bridgewater, sacked him 5 times. Their young defensive core,
defense is pretty good.
I mean, Devin White, Antoine Winfield, Levante David, Jordan Whitehead. I mean, there's just a lot of young guys there that could we probably haven't seen them even close to how good they can get.
Sure.
So I mean, that's what I've seen out of them in 2 games. Is their defense is better than what I expected.
We're running out of time right now, but just a couple quick hits. Cardinals beat Washington. Is there anything to write home about there? They beat the 49ers last week, but they do look amazing. DeAndre Hopkins fits that offense like a glove.
If you want an overreaction, Arizona is the most fun team to watch in the NFL.
They really are fun to watch. I agree with that 100%.
Yep.
They have just this electricity about him that I can't even imagine being a Cardinals fan. Like, you've got to be excited for what's to come with that team, especially when you got DeAndre Hopkins for that many years. The Packers game started out in the Lions' favor. The Lions were actually kind of dominating them in the beginning, and then the Packers just took over 42-21. I may be so wrong about the Packers this year. I still don't think I am. I still think they're weirdly overrated.
There's some fundamental issues. Their defense is not good.
Yeah.
But right now they're outscoring their problems.
Sure.
Aaron Rodgers is playing a man possessed. He was pissed at that Jordan Love pick. You can't tell me any different. He is coming out playing with poise and focus and confidence, and he looks dangerous.
It's also because he's single. There's actually been a graph that has shown that when Aaron Rodgers is single, he's deadly. But when he's dating Olivia Munn, when he's dating what's her tits from the
Danica Patrick,
Danica Patrick, he's bad. He's a guy that he's good when he's like lonely and sad and has all this angst. So watch out because he's angsty as fuck right now.
And I can tell you just from a fan's perspective, seeing what happened in Seattle last night made me more confident about their season.
Sure.
I think Cam's integration, he threw for 400 yards last night. So right. I think that arm's doing okay. He looks effective, man. It looks good. It's only second week in a system. I think that's only going to get better. Defense played well enough. Seattle's a really good team.
Yeah.
And they were still – I don't love the play call at the end of the game there. I think that little QB power off tackle is extremely predictable. Would prefer to see maybe a play action pass off that or just something else altogether. But they're right in there. And
in my mind, I like the quarterback run. I don't like the formation they did it out of. Like, why don't you spread them out and give an option like to either kick it out or power in? Like, spread it out.
Spread it out and do some kind of RPO. Do some kind of
exactly.
Yeah, I'm with you there. 100%.
I mean, it's possible that Bill Belichick is kind of allowing Cam Newton to get warmed up to the offense, and then he's going to unleash him. Because if he can find a way to just, have Cam Newton where he's throwing like he used to, and if he can design an offense around Brady and his lack of arm strength, I certainly think he can design one around Cam Newton and his ridiculous athletic prowess. So
yeah, and I mean, Belichick is a smart guy, obviously. When you're looking at that schedule, thinking about how good you get to the playoffs, that Seattle game is not one you circle as a must-win.
Sure.
You go in, you kind of expect an away game in Seattle. If there were fans, that game might not even be that close.
Right.
The 12th man there really makes a huge impact, but they look good. And the Jets are 2 free wins. They probably beat Miami again. They probably split with the Bills. Like they'll be in the playoffs, no problem.
Sure. Well, week 2 is in the books. Obviously, I'm fucking happy. The weather's turning into fall down here in Florida. I'm sure it is up north there in Indianapolis where you are, Brandon, but couldn't be happier. Football's back. On to week 3. Can't wait to bring another show next week where we over-exaggerate and overreact to what happens next week.
And change our opinions on everything we just said.
Exactly. I mean, I've done so many 180s. You have to sometimes, but any closing remarks?
Go Steelers, 2-0. Big Ben's revenge tour, undefeated.
Steelers look amazing. Yes. Dude, at this point, you've already won a game. Keep rolling, Jaguars. See what you can do. They're not going to win the Super Bowl this year, but they could certainly upset some teams this year. I love what I see out of them. Just get this whole Trevor Lawrence thing out of your mind and fucking go balls to the wall this year. I mean, they're running back undrafted. He now has a 100-yard game, rushing game under his belt already in week 2.
Yeah.
This team has a lot. It's the youngest team in the NFL, and I'm just excited to see what they do down the stretch.
For sure.
But all right, guys, thank you so much for joining us. Week 2 reactions, and we will see you next week. Thank you so much.
See ya.